Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our Ask Me Anything About MQTT session. Thank you for taking your time to attend this event today. A very warm welcome to you. I'm Marina Plashenko. I will be moderating this session today. With me are Jens Deters, Head of Professional Services, and Matthias Hofschen, Senior Consultant Professional Services at HiveMQ, who will be helping us tonight answering the questions, joined by Ravi Subramanyan, Director of Industry Solutions Manufacturing at HiveMQ. Ravi will be moderating the Q&A session today. A very warm welcome to you, Jens, Matthias, Ravi.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Marie.
Before we kick off, I'd like to say that we are recording this webinar and we will be sharing the recording in our follow-up email. And also, please feel free to submit your questions. We have a Q&A panel at the Zoom control panel below, so you can do it there. We have already received some of your questions and we will be answering them shortly. And lastly, we will be having two polls running today. So one will be at the very beginning in a minute, and the second one closer to the end. And I encourage you to participate in these polls because we would be thankful for your feedback. So without further ado, I will now start our first poll. Okay, so I have launched the poll now. I encourage you to participate. It's a couple of questions that you can see on the screen now, so please take your time and answer those. So I'll give you a minute and then we'll start with the main session. I can see your answers coming in. Thank you for your active participation. Yeah, let's leave it for another 30 seconds. Okay, I'm ending the poll now. Thank you very much for your participation. And yeah, so now I'm ready to hand it over to you, Ravi, and let's get it started.
All right. Thank you, Marina. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Happy to be here coordinating this session with Jens and Matthias. And like Marina said, we already have some questions that were submitted, and I see some of the participants that submitted the questions here as well. But please feel free to submit your other questions. We'll definitely try to answer. Let's get started with the first question here, and that's related to Sparkplug, right? The question is, for a non-primary application, what is the expected startup procedure? From the specification, they do not have immediate access to birth certificates or current state. And this was submitted by Lee, and who's also there on this meeting. Gentlemen, who would like to take up this question?
I can do.
Okay, great.
So I assume Lee is pointing here into direction that for now, birth and death messages or certificates are not sent retained, right? So could you get Lee on the call that he's able to give more details on that?
All right, Lee, if you can hear us, could you answer
hello.
the question? Hi.
Hi.
Yeah. Yeah, essentially. Yeah, they're not published as retained.
Right.
And also you can't connect with a persistent session because any of the current state that you'd receive from that birth certificate is well and truly out of date. So, you know, the primary application probably wants to know everything as soon as it connects. We've got a number of consumers that we're writing that also want to know everything when they connect.
Yeah, you're right. So with the current Sparkplug specification 2.2, it's yeah not specified that you are forced according to the specification to send these messages as retained. You can do actually, so it's not forbidden to do that, but it's not according to the specification, right? But the new specification 3.0 is almost ready to be released in the next 1 or 2 weeks. And there's a new optional, actually, but there is a new topic structure recommended to solve this. So it starts with $Sparkplug. And then you have yeah, certificates, namespace, group ID, and then nBirth or dBirth and so on. So the birth and death types and the edge node ID. And these messages should be or shall be sent retained to solve this. This is.
I guess that doesn't help with the current state. So if we're using for Sparkplug as a SCADA system,
yeah,
you'd want to load it up, and because it's data's only sent on change, you might have a set point or something that's set in the PLC that's only going to change once a day or week even. And so those will be unknown values until you get a birth certificate or you get it changed, because that retained message has an old state.
Yeah, so basically you also have to take to have a look at the messages. So which one of the birth or death messages is the latest one, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of the death message, which is obviously sent by last will and testament, the timestamp when this message is actually sent out also has to be set to the current value when the message is actually sent out, right? So by when you're storing this message during your connect, it contains the wrong timestamp, as you are you can't know when this message is going to be sent. We have created an open source extension for HiveMQ, which is called Sparkplug Aware extension, to handle this, to either handle the optional $Sparkplug topic structure with all the birth and death certificates, and also it will change the timestamp in the payload of the death message to the correct value.
That's where the magic is.
I think I can post the link to that repo.
Yeah, that'll be useful.
Yeah, that'll be good. And
that's the one.
Version 3.
It's not yet production ready, but it works. So you can use it already if you like.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
All right.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Lee, for the clarification. Jens, anything else you want to add on this?
No, I think that's
okay. Great. Thank you again, Jens, and thank you, Lee, for the clarification. All right. The second question that we received is regarding stability, which that's always the biggest thing on people's minds. And we're looking to develop infrastructure that will help us cope with like potentially hundreds or thousands of connections, if not millions of connections with devices. The question is MQTT suitable for this instance? And if so, what are the bottlenecks to look out for? And this was submitted by David from My Energy. Who would like to take this question?
Yeah, I can add a couple of thoughts to this one. So the simple answer is yes. The more complicated answer is yes, and choose HiveMQ. So essentially, scalability is, of course, one of the big questions. There's nothing in the MQTT protocol that talks about scalability. So it's really critical to choose an MQTT broker that places a lot of value on scalability and ideally elastic scalability, and ideally creates a distributed system, a cluster with no single point of failure. And that's why I'm pointing out HiveMQ. Of course, I'm working at HiveMQ, so you have to make up your own opinion about this. But here's what we offer in this area. First of all, millions of clients is not a problem. We have many production environments with customers where the number of client connections go into the millions. That's doable. The only thing that, so practical advice here, the thing that we need to keep in mind here is that each HiveMQ process that is, so let's assume we have a cluster of 5 HiveMQ nodes, and each one of those nodes runs on a system. Either it runs on bare metal, it runs on a VM in AWS or Azure, or it's even a pod on a Kubernetes cluster. That all doesn't matter, but there is a limit in terms of the number of connections a single machine can take. That's determined essentially by the Linux subsystem, which, let's say it should be easy to take about like 200 to 300,000 client connections. With a bit of tuning of the TCP stack, you can go higher, but essentially there is going to be a limit on a single machine. So you need to have a system that clusters. So if you wanted to have 3 million connections, then you need about 10 machines that work together in a cluster. HiveMQ has that capability. And what's really important here is that it scales elastically. So that means that if you're running, let's say, an 8-node cluster and you observe that the number of clients is increasing and increasing and you need to add capacity, then you can start new nodes that join the cluster elastically. You don't have to restart the entire system. You just start nodes that elastically join the existing cluster and extend the scalability. Another thing that I wanted to point out here is that there's no single point failure for HiveMQ, since it's a system that does not rely on a master process to make sure that nodes are up and running. So that's also good.
Great.
David is on the call, right?
Yes, he's on the call. I was going to suggest maybe we can bring in David to see if we answer his question or if he has any further questions. Could you bring David in?
Yeah.
David de Batel?
David de Batel.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So while you're bringing him in, right? I just wanted to also add the point that obviously Matthias mentioned the technical capabilities. HiveMQ started in connected cars, and one of the first requirements we got was we had to connect up to millions of devices. So that's kind of like in our bedrock, if you will, of our solution, if you will, right? So I just wanted to add that as well, that that's kind of like what we do day in and day out. Go ahead, David. Do you have any further clarifications or questions? Did we answer your question?
Yeah, you're still muted, just in case you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, David, so you can talk.
Oh, there you go. Right.
Hello. Yes, so it's actually Ian here. So I think David has been unable to make it, but yes, thank you very much. I did get the answer, so thank you very much for that. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, so we can move on to the next question here, which is, so what's this is another good one that a lot of customers ask. What's the best way to connect multiple remote brokers? Can I run one broker and connect to other brokers using multiple credentials simultaneously? And this was submitted by Taichi Hirio from Docomo USA. Who would like to take this question?
Yeah, I can address that question.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, if you take one client, like a sensor, some device or something like that, theoretically it could connect to multiple brokers. Of course, then that client would have to manage these multiple standing TCP connections, and that's usually not a good idea. Something that we see a lot in IIoT, in industrial use cases, we see that there is a need to set up a hierarchical system, so to say, brokers that talk to brokers. As far as HiveMQ goes, our solution for that is called the bridge extension. So what it would look like is that within a factory, you would operate a broker cluster, a HiveMQ cluster, that connects the sensors and the devices and the PLCs from the factory. Then on that device, there is a bridge extension installed that knows which cloud broker to connect to and forward messages, MQTT messages to. In a sense, then from multiple factory locations, we can then collect messages and send them further up the hierarchical chain into the central cloud broker installation. Now, the question is, how far do you want to take this? Should there be another level on top? So probably in terms of the number of hierarchies, I would put a cap. Otherwise, the system, the architecture gets too complicated, but that would be the solution. So if you check our documentation, it's the enterprise extension, the bridge extension that would address that. There's also nice things like a loop prevention encoded there, because one of the things that you need to make sure is that you don't ping pong messages around like crazy. So yeah, that's my answer to that.
Thank you, Matthias. Jens, would you like to add anything to that, or?
No, I think it's fine.
I think we're good. All right. Okay. So we do have Tai Chi on the line. Should we maybe bring him in to see if we answer this question? And while we do that, right, what I would also like to add is to Matthias's point, a lot of our clients use our bridge extension, especially on the manufacturing side of things, where they want to have local kind of like factories be able to consolidate all of the data, and that consolidated data needs to then be reconsolidated on an enterprise level. So this we have local brokers that does the consolidation in individual sites, and then this then gets consolidated into the enterprise broker through the bridge extension. So a lot of our customers use that heavily. Were we able to bring in Tai Chi, or?
Yeah, just a second.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add on that, we have worldwide operating manufacturing clients using our bridge extension really to share MQTT messages completely around the world. So
awesome. Yeah, makes sense. Tai Chi, I see that. Okay, I think you're still muted. Yes. Can you hear us, Tai Chi? I think he went back on mute. If you can hear us, or if you can speak, can you unmute and then let us know if we answered your question? Or would you like to ask any follow-up question? Okay, looks like we might be having some issues here. In the interest of time, is it okay? One more time, Tai Chi, are you able to hear us? Okay, looks like we're having some technical issues. Why don't we maybe in the if we can bring him maybe later, that's fine. We can move on to the next question.
He doesn't have the working mic, he just writes, so that's fine.
All right, we'll just
thanks for your question.
Right. Okay, I think you did a great job answering the question. No further questions, it looks like. All right. Okay, the next one is like, does anyone consider the need to certify the implementation of MQTT Sparkplug clients on devices, applications for industries? For example, confirmation of compliance with the specification by an accredited test unit. This was submitted by Jakub Wasilowski from PSI Polska. Who would like to take this question?
I'm happy to pick this one.
Yes, please. Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, I think basically to test compliance and compatibility makes total sense here. As far as I know, for now, there's no official certification authority for Sparkplug devices and applications. But there is a Sparkplug test compatibility kit, which is also contributed by us at HiveMQ. This is also on its way to be released according to the Sparkplug 3.0 specification. It's basically a web application that contains a test suite to cover several topics in terms of client and application and also primary application compatibility. I think I can also paste the link to that repository, because it's already there. It's available. It's at the official Eclipse Tahoe Sparkplug repo.
Yep.
And yeah,
awesome.
As I said, this is basically if you start and run this will start a local web console. You can easily access with your browser and start testing.
Awesome, great, cool. Thank you for that answer. Oh, you wanted to add something, Matthias?
No. I was just going to point out the follow-up question from David Patel's account.
Yes, I was just going to bring it up. So yeah, let's address that. Actually, what he's asking is, like, we're using AWS for cloud. Is it possible to use HiveMQ together with AWS IoT, or does HiveMQ replace AWS IoT? What are the advantages of using HiveMQ over AWS IoT? Matthias, would you like to take that?
Well, the simple answer is yes, of course, you should replace AWS IoT with HiveMQ. What are the reasons? So with a grain of salt, essentially, the question is, do you need AWS IoT? Can you replace it? Are you using features that you're reliant here on? So for example, AWS IoT is not a 100% MQTT compliant implementation of the protocol. And if you wanted to use, for example, Sparkplug, the Sparkplug specification with AWS IoT, you will find that difficult to do. So at HiveMQ, of course, we would prefer you to use HiveMQ instead of AWS IoT. And that is not a problem on AWS Cloud. So to run a HiveMQ cluster on AWS Cloud, everything that you need can be provided. And if you do that, then the next question will be, how can you forward messages, MQTT messages, for backend processing, for example? On AWS, the simplest way to do that I found using, for example, MSK, the MSK service from AWS, which is a managed Kafka service. And from there, you could, for example, use Kinesis data analytics and process your data further. So a lot of times, using HiveMQ instead of AWS IoT, the question is, what other backend services do you want to use?
Yes.
A lot of times it's about having a queue that you can let your messages flow into, from which all other backend systems can retrieve and process messages for predictive analytics or whatever your use case would be.
Yeah. And I know that we had go ahead, Jens, please.
No, the same combination of HiveMQ with the Kafka extension you can also use on Azure, for instance, to connect to Azure Event Hubs, right? And if you are in terms of AWS IoT, you are depending on the AWS IoT device management stuff, and you're using Greengrass. it's also possible to do a mixture here. So use AWS IoT resources for your device management, and use a different way into the cloud, using HiveMQ just for the data streams, on the data messages. You can use both in parallel if there's a need for that.
I want to add one thing here. So it shouldn't come across that we're just wanting to sell HiveMQ. Of course, that's always nice, right? But there's a larger point here, and the point is there's a specification. There's a specification MQTT 3.1.1, and then there is the follow-up specification MQTT 5. Yeah. And if vendors don't follow in their implementation of the specification, if they don't implement the full specification, we have compatibility problems. I would really strongly suggest to whatever MQTT broker you want to use to check, do you have the 100% compatibility? Because as time goes on in the next 10 years, year after year, the capabilities of devices and other actors in the MQTT space, they're going to increase, and they're going to rely on using these MQTT features. And if I have a broker that doesn't fully support that, then that is a problem. That will limit your use cases. And I wouldn't do that.
Absolutely. That's a great response. Actually, this addressed one of the other questions that we had regarding vendor lock-in, right? And I think you made all the points regarding that, but didn't quite mention that. So the only thing I would like to add is that if you go with, say, AWS IoT or Azure IoT Hub, if you will, right? So you're pretty much locked into that ecosystem, right? So apart from the benefits that we provide from a general broker, implementing all of the feature functionality of MQTT and the rich experience that we provide, we also avoid vendor lock-in. We provide the variety of being able to connect to multiple different applications apart from just Azure or AWS. Anything else you wanted to add on that point, Matthias or Jens, around the vendor lock-in that you may not have said already? Okay, I think you pretty much made the point.
I just want to emphasize here that it's not even the MQTT specification the vendors are implementing here is not. It's just really a really basic subset. So it's more or less about you are able to deliver MQTT messages via the IoT hubs of the different vendors. So there's almost no quality of service. You're not free to define your own topic structure. There's no support of retained messages, and so it's basically just to connect and to deliver MQTT messages, just to publish.
Right.
In a very limited way.
Yes. Okay. Great.
And you also are able to subscribe to topics for sure.
Yes. Of course. In the meantime, we did get another question on the chat or the Q&A. Gurkhan Sekik had a question about why I need to implement Sparkplug specification instead of basic specification. I believe he means MQTT. So maybe if Gurkhan is available, if we can maybe bring him in to clarify his question, that would be great. Could we bring him in, Marina?
Yeah, I think he's on the way.
Yeah, he's here. Gurkhan, if you can unmute yourself, please, you can talk.
Can you hear us, Gurkhan? Hello. Yeah, looks like we might have the same technical issues. David, for example, came back. The other person that wasn't able to talk came back and said that his mic wasn't working. So I'm not sure if. He clarified actually. What he means is MQTT. So why implement Sparkplug over basic MQTT is what he's asking.
Maybe I'll start with like a short answer. The clarification. So MQTT is a wire protocol. So it is basically describing how to publish and subscribe messages, and it doesn't say anything about the payload of the message or any other It doesn't contain anything in its specification that limits basically the usage of this protocol. And then that's where Sparkplug comes in. And Jens, you probably should then continue.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, as Matthias already said, so MQTT is the protocol, which is connecting clients, delivering messages, receiving messages, which make this happen. And Sparkplug is a specification on top of MQTT, which defines a topic namespace, which defines the payload format, which also defines state management. So it covers all the, at the end, the disadvantages you will get from plain MQTT, because MQTT basically it's so versatile that you can use it for a lot of use cases, but with not a defined topic structure, with not defined concepts like report by exception, for instance, and so on.
Of course, that's a positive thing that MQTT doesn't do that, because all verticals will have their own requirements in terms of what might have to be specified. I'm just, for example, pointing to Sphera. That would be a specification for train systems for driving trains, is an example.
Great.
Yeah, there are more and more specifications coming up for the industry to make use of MQTT, but to specify for a specific industry. Matthias already mentioned the Sphera specification for international train connections. There's a new specification from the German public transportation organization, the VDV, the Verband Deutscher Verkehrsbetriebe. They are creating a specification how to use MQTT and to drive the digital transformation of the public transportation.
Absolutely.
There's another standard which is called a VDA 5050, which defines how robots in terms of logistics should coordinate themselves, so to make them interoperable if you have different vendors of logistic robots, for instance. And Sparkplug is the specification to cover mainly or to focus the manufacturing industry.
Yes. Yeah.
But I'm also using Sparkplug for my smart home here at home. So there's a defined payload, there's a defined topic structure. I have concepts like report by exception. I have a built-in state management and command messages and so on. So it defines what I basically have to agree on myself or on my enterprise. When it comes to how to use MQTT, so that brings a lot of freedom and solves a lot of problems, especially with the state management. You have the support of plug and play for devices. You're just switching on your Sparkplug compatible device, and it immediately sends out this. We had this already, the birth message to a certain topic to state, here I am. It's a new device. I have there's a bunch of meta information you can send for the device. Like manufacturer and firmware version, and also the set of commands the device understands, and how you can work with that device. So that's really great, I think.
All right, good. And if I could just add, obviously, like you said, Jens, Sparkplug is heavily used in manufacturing. From my perspective, what I see is that In manufacturing, it's not individual devices, right? You have a subsystem of devices that need to all send messages together. And that's where using the data model that Sparkplug provides, where you can define a complex structure of machine subsystems, really comes into play that I've noticed. So, and there is actually another comment by Matthew Paris on like one of the previous responses that you gave. It's just some clarification on Lee's question that you answered, Jens. In regarding to Lee's question for Sparkplug, yes, today Sparkplug requires a client to request a rebirth to obtain all current values. Data is not retained on the broker. People in Sparkplug working group are considering improvements to the specification to decouple two purposes of birth. One is the metadata, including data types, templates, etc., and the data types most likely to be stale, where the metadata is keen as retained, and they're kept as retained, and there is some command to request all current values. I think that's a great clarification, Matthew. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah,
all
that's
right. Good. All right, so we have another question from an anonymous attendee. Does HiveMQ support communication from or to IoT devices based on microPython, like ESP32 IoT devices, for example? Anybody would like to take that up?
So HiveMQ supports MQTT communications, and as long as you have support on these devices with the MQTT library, clearly you can use it. I also have a bunch of ESPs here at home. They have a Wi-Fi stack on board, so you're able to establish TCP connections. MQTT is TCP based, so yeah, it works. It works really great.
Great. Awesome.
It has some limitations when it comes to deal with certificates or with encoding and decoding payloads. But I think the ESP32 is capable to handle this. Arduino, with another Arduino, it's you have limitations on the capacity, the CPU power, and so on.
Yes, absolutely. Great. Anything that you would like to add?
But even an Arduino device is able to send MQTT messages and basic values like temperature, humidity, or something.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Anything that you would like to add, Matthias, to that?
Absolutely nothing to this question.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So we have another. So Lee basically came back and said to our conversation, awesome. So the expectation is that the consumer will send a end of node command and request a rebirthing. So back to the conversation around Sparkplug, just a clarifying statement. And thank you, Lee, for that. All right. The next question is again from Gurkhan. And I know that you probably won't be able to come live, but here is the question. Is your product mainly located to bring one or more production lines to cloud to combine and be reachable on the cloud worldwide in IIoT architecture? Honestly, I will replay in record and take notes as I don't have stable internet connection. So basically that's what he's asking. Yeah. Who would like to take that?
Let me try to give an answer to this one. So yes, combining production lines and sending telemetry data from devices via, for example, a local HiveMQ broker onwards to a cloud broker. Yes, absolutely possible. Now the question is gone.
I'm sorry. I think it's in the answered section.
Yeah.
My apologies.
There it is. Well, what does it mean reachable? So usually what you want to do in terms of a manufacturing architecture is that the central HiveMQ installation or the central MQTT broker installation collects all the messages from all the production lines, and backend systems subscribe either directly as MQTT clients, or you're using a system, and I favor that in architectures, or you're using a queue, for example, the Kafka queue that we've mentioned earlier. So basically you have your HiveMQ broker and install the HiveMQ Kafka extension on it, connect to a Kafka queue, and have it forward all the relevant MQTT messages to Kafka. From Kafka, you can then run as many consumers as you want, backend consumers, to consume these messages and act on the messages for predictive analytics, for storing in a data lake, or in S3 buckets, or whatever you need to do, depending on your use case. That's a good pattern because the backend systems will not add load to the actual running MQTT broker. And so you can at any point have exploratory data analytics on the Kafka queue or on the other queues that you're using, and not worry about implicating any production setups.
Awesome. Thank you, Matthias.
Yeah, that's how fast data architectures are built. So for instance, if you have millions of cars and each car has 10 or 15 MQTT connections, it's not one, mostly it's not one MQTT connection per car. So there are many devices or establishing MQTT connections. So we are talking about millions of MQTT connections to a broker cluster, sending at a very high frequency, 10K, 20K messages. So you have to deal with all that, and we have to build up a resilient data pipeline for that.
Yeah.
And having a HiveMQ cluster with the Kafka connection, that's really a dream team here.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Jens, and thank you, Matthias, for answering that question. So if I could just add from our customer perspective, right? I mean, just looking at this, we have a lot of customers, again, that are using HiveMQ to connect their production lines. They have like multiple locations, like we mentioned, across the world, and they want to ensure that all the devices within the individual locations can talk to each other, right? Bring the data together using our broker, and then all of that can be combined on an enterprise location. Now, the enterprise location can be on the cloud, of course. That's always great because cloud provides a lot of great capabilities. But if cloud is not possible, it could also be on-premise, but it could be in centralized enterprise location defined by the client. We have also had that implementation as well, and the bridge extension that we talked about is the one that bridges from the local individual location to the enterprise location. So a lot of our customers have used that. Great, thank you. Okay, any other? Yeah, so I see one other question. Okay, so he just says, thank you. All right, at this point, I know we talked a lot about communication. Let's fork over to maybe security. I think that's a question that everybody is always interested in. And this question is posted by Andreas. I know Andreas is not on the line, but specifically, is it possible for customers to organize their own security certificate system? Is the question. Who would like to take this question up?
I can give it a shortish answer. So essentially, what to keep in mind here is that the MQTT protocol in itself doesn't specify security. So it's up to the actual MQTT broker implementation on what is offered in terms of security. So I'll take reference to HiveMQ, of course, and what we would offer here. Certificate management is basically two things. It's the server certificate. So, and maybe also as a contrast to some of the cloud providers, you can configure HiveMQ server certificates any which way you want. It can be a self-signed certificate, or it can be a CA assigned certificate. That is flexible, and essentially it is being configured onto the actual HiveMQ node. What's important to remember here is that self-signed certificates usually require clients to have access to the public key, whereas CA signed certificates, if they are part of, for example, let's say you have a Java client, if they're part of the CA certs file from Java, so they're inside of the the certificate store of the Java installation that you're running, then you would not necessarily have to have a public key here. The second part here is, of course, you can also do mutual TLS, which means that there is a client certificate, and the client essentially authenticates by providing his client certificate. Here we offer from HiveMQ, we offer the enterprise security extension, and the enterprise security extension can access the incoming certificate, parse it, and, for example, retrieve a value from the certificate that then is further used for authorization. So basically figure out what is this client allowed to publish to or subscribe to. In terms of a certificate system, it's flexible. You can set up PKI infrastructure, you build up your key stores and trust stores, and then incorporate them into HiveMQ and use them there.
Thanks, Matthias. Jens, would you like to add something?
And you are, with the enterprise security extension, you are also able to deal with JWT tokens and OAuth 2 implementations, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Maybe just to mention this here very briefly, we have talked about all these different extensions, the Kafka extension, the bridge extension, the security extension, and so on. So obviously, within HiveMQ, we have an extension system, which comes with an SDK, like a programmable SDK. And essentially, it's like a Lego, like a set of Lego stones. So you can extend and implement custom functionality with this. And we, of course, offer lots of services around that, just to round out the discussion of extensions.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of our customers actually use these the SDKs to build their own extensions to their own custom applications that they may have. And I understand that we actually help develop some of those custom extensions as well on a basis.
Yeah. We are not only supporting implementing custom extensions, we are also reviewing custom extensions and to make sure they are proper programmed and will not harm an existing cluster.
Correct.
And we also grant
I want to add that is, I think, Matthias, you mentioned that we can actually use some of the security postures that like the IT team of the customer already has in place with our security extension, right? Meaning like a lot of our customers come and say, hey, we already have IT policies. These are the policies from a security perspective. We don't want yet another software to have its own security policy that we have to manage. We want to reuse whatever we have, and the security extension helps with that, which a lot of our customers really like.
So I want to be careful here because there is a lot of security systems out there, a lot of ways on how to implement security. The enterprise security extension tries to be as flexible as possible, but of course we would have to look in detail on what is entailed here. If there's an LDAP system, yes, that can be incorporated. An SQL database that contains security setups can be incorporated. Jens already mentioned JWT token parsing, so OAuth workflows can be implemented. So there's a whole lot of things possible, but of course, in each individual instance, we'll have to take a detailed look at how to do it.
Absolutely, and thanks for the clarification. Great. So the other question that I have is, again, another favorite of customers. OPC UA versus Sparkplug, right? What separates MQTT and other similar standard-based protocols when it comes to enabling IIoT data connectivity? Now, obviously, we provided some of these things, but like specifically OPC UA versus Sparkplug is the question.
Yeah, I already mentioned some features of the Sparkplug specification, or what is defined within the Sparkplug specification. If you and basically OPC UA is not a protocol. Also, Sparkplug is not a protocol. The protocol we are talking about here is MQTT for Sparkplug, and right. HTTP with a SOAP on top of it when it comes to OPC UA. And basically OPC UA and MQTT following different communication patterns. So obviously MQTT is PubSub, and OPC UA, it's HTTP based. It's request response. So that's with the PubSub, you have a very distributed connection for all the clients and consumers. With OPC UA and HTTP, you have a direct client-server connection, which in large enterprises, this leads into kind of a spaghetti architecture. So anyone has to, who is interested in data, has to connect to the right server, which is providing the data you might be interested in. This might not fulfill the requirements of the Industry 4.0 movement. So if you want to turn your enterprise or your business into a data-driven company, you have to implement a different information model for your enterprise. For industrial IoT, this means you have to implement a unified namespace as the center of your data connectivity and your data exchange. So this means what you would like to achieve here is that anyone in the business who is interested in any kind of data or information should be able to be provided with this data and information in almost real time. So when dealing with OPC UA infrastructure, it's really complicated to share all the data in this unified namespace way. You have to deal with several steps using middleware to make sure that the different layers of your enterprise are able to share data here. Right. With a unified namespace, anyone of the enterprise is able to access and to consume data. And I think with OPC UA, it's really hard to create a unified namespace. And the fun fact here is recently the OPC Foundation added a new chapter to the already existing 1,200 plus pages of the OPC UA specification. It's chapter 14, and it's about PubSub. And so they recommend using MQTT or AMQP, but they basically recommend MQTT for that when it comes to PubSub to create a unified namespace. So,
yeah, great.
In that case, I would really recommend to consider to change your complete information model of your enterprise. You can still use OPC UA for different things, but you need to implement gateways to provide MQTT traffic.
Yeah, in other words, we could use the PubSub capabilities of OPC UA to bridge to an MQTT cluster, right?
That's right.
So that would be an effort, but it's doable. Yeah. All right. Okay. So I think we're getting to almost the end. We can probably take a couple more questions. One is back to Lee. So the question he asked is, what would be the expected behavior of a subscriber when an out of order message comes in? Sequence number not expected. Would you like to address that, Jens, since you were already answering Lee's question, or?
Yeah, so it really depends what Lee is focusing here. So
yeah, maybe I don't know.
It would
Lee,
be great to get more context here. So basically, a primary application would behave differently than a data consumer at a historian database or other MQTT application.
Yeah, as you can see, I'm very interested in getting into the nitty gritty of Sparkplug, where we're implementing a consumer that's going to, essentially read, and write into a historian. So we've got specific cases which are a bit outside of the primary application.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to figure out, so 0 to 255, what do we do when we do get an out of order message? Do we just continue on as if nothing's happened? Do we, the sequence number's there for a reason. What we can't quite figure out is what the expected behavior is meant to be when we get an out of sequence payload.
Mm-hmm. How do you detect that a sequence number is not as expected? So it's a duplicated sequence number of an existing message, or?
Yeah, so we keep a state on the consumer side that knows what its last sequence number was and attempts to process them in order. So if we just happen to not find number 128 for whatever reason, what do we do when we get to 129?
And don't you also have a look at the timestamp of the message or the metric you would like to store to these?
No, we don't actually. I mean, we write into the database using the metric timestamp, but we don't process them in time order. We'd be processing them within a sequence order.
Ah, okay.
So our timestamps are driven by the PLCs, the devices that we're reading from. So if they've got some timestamp, time drift, then we're going to have out of time order messages.
Yeah,
so we find that atomic clock.
Yeah, also some PLCs don't have a clock on it, right? So you can rely on the timestamp sometimes.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
I'm happy to take these sort of things offline if if you want to
so I don't actually have a quick answer on that, but I'm happy to keep in touch with you to discuss this and to find a solution.
Yeah, and I know Lee, while you're on the line, you did have another question about like persisting the data on a historian. So maybe that could be something that we could also take offline.
Yeah, I've hogged it enough with Sparkplug questions.
No, that's fine. It's all good questions.
No, that's great. So basically we see a lot of attention to Sparkplug in the industry. That's really great. It's really increasing very fast.
I don't know if the other person's still on, but we implemented our own protobuf-based protocol or messaging format. And we found that there was a bunch of gaps that we hadn't considered. So interoperability, and also there's a bunch of people who are thinking about problems that you're probably not going to think of. So if you have the opportunity, instead of using MQTT basic, I think as it was put, Sparkplug solves a bunch of problems that you don't even know about yet.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we do have Matthew still on the line. We are up against the time. I don't know if we can chime in, or maybe we can have an offline conversation. But thank you so much for your feedback, Lee. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Saul.
Right. Thank you. So we have a couple minutes. Marina, are we okay to just take one last question, or?
Yeah, sure. Let's go.
Okay. Yeah. So just like one last question, and this is about the common form of broker cluster deployment in industrial manufacturing projects. Is it cloud or on-prem? I think we kind of answered some of these questions, but further, the question is like from a cloud architecture perspective, do IoT devices connect to broker directly over public internet, or additional broker instances running on DMZ? Submitted by Jakub.
So just a very quick answer here. probably hard to cut it into one single answer. It will depend on the individual use case and situation of the customer. Some of the building blocks would be the bridge extension to connect brokers with each other. So yes, public internet is most of the time part of the solution. Sometimes we have customers that have internal company networks, so that would be okay too. If it's public, then one of the requirements would be TLS, so that connection is secured. And so having several clusters connected with the bridge, I think, is the main answer to this question.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Matthias. Much appreciated. Jens, anything to add from your side, or you good?
No, it's really as always, it depends. So it really depends on your use case, on your requirements. Do you have a distributed environment with several plants all around the planet, or is this a local shop floor only? So do you want to connect your some kind of your data to cloud services for analytics?
Right.
It really depends, but you can do anything you can imagine in combination.
Right. Absolutely, and it also depends on the customer use case, whether they want to stay on-prem or cloud, or the region of the world they're in. Sometimes public clouds don't work for them. They have to be on private, so they might choose not to go public over the internet. So there's that also. All right, with that, I would like to hand back to Marina, because I think we have exhausted all the questions, and thank you so much for the time. Marina, go ahead. It's all yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Jens, Matthias, and Ravi. And thank you everyone for attending and for interacting and submitting all of these questions. So I will run the second poll now, and we'll leave it for a minute so that you could provide your feedback. So let me do this. Okay. The poll is up and running. So I would like to say that we will be sharing the recording of this webinar together with the links to some useful resources in the follow-up emails. You will be getting those in next couple of days. Also, soon we will announce our next Ask Me Anything About MQTT session on our website, so keep an eye on it. And always feel free to reach out to us in case you have any questions. We're here to help. So I'll give you another 30 seconds to provide your feedback, and thank you so much. I can see that you're participating in the poll. It's wonderful. While we are finishing the poll, maybe you have any additional closing thoughts, Ravi, Jens, or Matthias, on our session today?
Yeah, I would like to defer to Jens and Matthias to provide their closing thoughts.
I can only say 100% MQTT.
Awesome. Jens, second that?
Yes, and as I already mentioned, I see a lot of traction in direction of Sparkplug, and I really appreciate that. I really like that. So I think Sparkplug is just starting, and it's getting more and more important for the industry.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I can just add that the customers that I talk to from a manufacturing perspective, they are very excited about MQTT, right? Even without being technically oriented, just the feature functionality that we provide, the ability to basically use like a quarter of the bandwidth to provide like a lot more output is like enough for them, right? I mean, the amount of money they can save on cellular costs and other costs is the clincher, not to talk about the efficiency that it brings as well. So.
Thank you so much. I have ended the poll now. Thank you very much for participation. Thanks again, Jens, Matthias, and Ravi. Thank you, dear audience, once again. And let us call it a day. It was great to see you all. And goodbye. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye-bye.
All right. Excellent. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.